I'm Zion Sparrow, your co-chapter lead from Ladies at UX SF, and I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. So before we dive in, we'd like to know where everyone is joining us from. So please take a moment to share your location in the chat so we can get a sense of the geographic spread of our attendees. We're thrilled to have Jess Gardner as a special guest, who will be sharing her transformative insights on the secret sauce of storytelling, a framework for telling your story well. And then, so I'm going to take a quick look at our agenda. We'll begin with a warm welcome and introductions to our dedicated Ladies at UX SF and LA team members. We'll then share more about who we are and how to stay connected with our community. And then we're going to cover the event rules and code of conduct to ensure a great experience for everyone. And then my co-chapter lead, Shell, will give a brief introduction to the event's themes and objectives, followed by introduction to our speaker for today, Jess Gardner, before we dive into our main discussion. And then after that, we're going to close with opportunity for feedback, because your input is invaluable for our growth and improvement. And then, so as we kick off this event, I want to emphasize the significance of bringing together our San Francisco and Los Angeles chapters. By connecting these two communities, we're going to create a powerful platform for learning, sharing ideas, and building relationships within the UX field. So regardless of your level of experience, this event is designed to provide value and foster growth. So we encourage you to actively participate, ask questions, and engage with your fellow attendees. So let's make the most of this opportunity to expand our knowledge, challenge ourselves, and explore the diverse perspectives and innovations that our UX community has to offer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Zion Sparrow, co-chapter lead of Ladies at UX San Francisco and senior staff interaction designer at Samsung. And it's been a pleasure working with the fantastic co-chapter leads from both San Francisco and Los Angeles to bring this event to life. And now I'd like to introduce you to my fellow co-chapter leads, starting with Shell Soriano. Shell, would you mind sharing a bit about yourself and then introducing our first Los Angeles co-chapter lead?
Hey everyone, I'm a co-lead for the San Francisco chapter along with Zion. I'm currently in school pursuing my master's in human-computer interaction. So I am forever working on my portfolio and case studies. And so I'm excited to hear more about storytelling today and listening to what Jess Gardner has to share. And so I will pass it over to the Los Angeles chapter and I'll popcorn it to Nicole.
Thanks, Shell. Yeah, we are so honored to be here and so happy to be here with Jess, especially, and being able to co-host with San Francisco. I am Nicole, the co-chapter lead for Los Angeles Ladies at UX, and we are really happy to revamp our chapter with San Francisco as well. And I'm a UX researcher. My interests are in fashion and fintech, and primarily I like to hang out in the Web3 space. And I will pass it on over to my lovely co-lead, Amanda.
Hey everybody, I'm Amanda. I'm a senior UXR in ed tech, and I've got a background almost a decade long in design and strategy and research. And I'm just so thrilled to be here and support all of you, sort of bridging that journey between our sisters in the Bay and our girlies here in LA. And so popcorn to Coco.
Hey, I'm Coco, design thinker and facilitator, currently contracting with Blink UX. Also super excited to be here. Just some fun facts about me. I love to cook, also love beauty and fashion. And when I'm hanging out on the weekends, I'm usually outside, and currently right now I'm working on a puzzle, which is pretty cool. And I will bring it back to Zayan.
Oh, you're muted.
It will be Amanda.
Yeah. We're vibing. We're sharing the love. But I mean, ultimately, great example of us just continually keeping that open door and bridging the gap between SF and LA. We share very similar missions and goals. We're very interested in supporting female professionals all across the board, no matter where you are in your career and span of life. And we're just so happy for you to join us and be a part of our kickoff event today. This is our first ever of 2024 for both chapters. So we're so happy you're here. And then a great way to do that and stay connected with this bridge across both sides is to join our socials. So we've got a ton of links there, as well as I'll be sending you guys in the chat our links as well. And then that post-event survey would mean so much for you to fill that out. That'd be awesome. But you can hit us up on here. We're real active. You're going to see all our upcoming events and everything that is, you know, West Coast California girlies. So yes, next slide. I'll hand it off to Coco.
Thanks, Amanda. Just a quick reminder, just to keep our event smooth. So if you wouldn't mind just keeping your mics muted when you're not speaking, and you can also use the chat for questions. We do have a Q&A feature with this webinar, so you're more than welcome to type your questions there. But you could also just type in the chat and we'll just kind of keep an eye on that. Our code of conduct is just to ensure a very respectful and inclusive environment. This is a safe space. And so without going any further, let's just make today a very fun and positive event and enjoyable for all.
So for our event today, we will be focusing on actionable strategies through Jess Gardner's secret sauce of storytelling framework. Expect to tackle storytelling challenges and engage in chat discussions. So don't be shy, ladies. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat and apply what you're learning in real time. So we are excited to introduce Jess Gardner. She's a distinguished storytelling and communication coach. Jess has worked with designers from Google, Yelp, and Uber, revolutionizing storytelling and communication. Jess's workshop will empower and enhance our ability to share ideas with clarity and impact. Her expertise is invaluable for anyone looking to refine their storytelling. So looking forward to an inspiring session and finding out what Jess's secret sauce is. Here to share some insights on storytelling, let's welcome Jess Gardner.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Let me just switch over and pull up my slides. Nice to have everybody here. And I'm so excited that I get to be your first event of the year. That's awesome. All right, are you seeing my slides? Awesome. All right, so yeah, welcome, of course, to the secret sauce of storytelling, my framework to help make what is often sort of a stressful process a little more fun and enjoyable and easy. That's my goal for today. And thanks again for that nice intro. I'm really happy to be here. But since you've heard a little bit about me, I would like to know a little something about you, our audience. So my first question, if you could write it in the chat, is what is the biggest challenge you're having right now with storytelling? Is it motivation? Is it clarity? Length? Trying to make it engaging? What is it? Making it cohesive, keeping it short. Yes, those are both important. Finding the story. Yep. Good. Well, I'm definitely seeing some themes. That's good. That definitely checks out with what I have heard in the past. Question 2, then. What is the area in which you're really struggling most with storytelling right now? Is it portfolio case studies? Is it presentations and interviews? Is it something else? Like what situation are you feeling like you need storytelling for the most right now? So presentations, case studies, interviews, presentations. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Sounds like kind of a mix. Great. And if you could have one wish to help you solve this problem, what would you wish for? Knowing what questions your audience has ahead of time, that's good. Wanting to stand out, a blueprint, those are good. Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see how much we can get through in an hour. I definitely have a framework for you. Hopefully that, may work as a blueprint. Yeah, definitely. Feel free to keep putting stuff in the chat. I agree. Those are some good ideas. Gives me a sense to make sure we're on the same page, and I think we are. So, I'm a former classroom teacher, and I can't resist an opportunity to give a quiz. So we've got a 1-question quiz to start off today, but I'm going to make it easy for you. It's multiple choice. What is a story? Is it an account of incidents or events? Is it a statement regarding the pertinent facts? Or is it an anecdote? And by an anecdote, I mean a usually short narrative of an interesting, amusing, or biographical incident. A, B, or C, please put your guess in the chat. A lot of C's. Good strategy with your test taking. So, I'm one of those teachers. It was a trick question. Technically, they're all correct according to Merriam-Webster, but you are right. C is the one we're going to really be focusing on today. And as a coach, I see a lot of A and B happening, particularly in case studies, but C is kind of what we want. We want to make it interesting. We want to make it some kind of emotional connection. If we can make it amusing or engaging for our audience, obviously that's the goal. So just try to remember C is our goal for today. So that's going to come up when we get to the point where we're kind of talking about some of the common mistakes that people make and how we can use the framework to avoid those mistakes. So my agenda for today, I'm going to share a little bit about my story and background and expertise so you understand how I've come to be chatting with you today. Then I will share the secret sauce framework. As I said, some common mistakes and what you can do instead. I'll share some examples. I'm going to try to help you apply what we've learned and see how you can use this framework in your next presentation or case study. Then I've got a special offer just for ladies at UX, since this is your first event. And then we'll have the Q&A. And as they mentioned, as the co-hosts mentioned, there is a separate Q&A feature. So if you want to put your questions there rather than in the chat, that might help me keep track a little bit, or just save them till the end. That works too. So as we said, I want to try to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free to participate and visit in the chat. I'm going to share a handout at the end with some key takeaways so that you don't have to feel like you have to write everything down. Just, take it easy and enjoy. So a little bit about me. I am originally from Minnesota, and I did my undergrad at the University of Minnesota Morris. I was a fine art history major, but I also learned some of the basics of graphic design, taught myself Photoshop as a lot of people did back then. And the things I enjoyed most about art making, or the mediums I enjoyed most, I guess, were metal casting, stained glass, and working with the digital mediums. And those are the things that I still enjoy doing today when I, as a hobby, sort of when I have some spare time. Most of my digital work now focuses on the stuff for my business. But eventually, when I got out of school, I got my first job working as a graphic designer, and I worked at a small newspaper in southern Minnesota called the Free Press. And I enjoyed that. I worked there for about a year, but I really got sick of Minnesota winters, and so decided to move to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I've been for many years now. and thought, oh, this is gonna be great. I've got my first job. I'm a graphic designer. I'm gonna go work in California. But as many of you know, it's a very tough, competitive place to get a design job. And so that did not go according to plan. I moved here after a few months getting rejected. I was like, well, I guess it's admin work then. And so I started working as an admin and kind of doing graphic design as a side hustle or as part of my job. So, I did a contract for Disney Publishing. I worked as an admin at Howard Hughes Medical Institute and did some graphic design as a part of that job. But I kind of realized, working full-time in design is probably not going to be my path at this point in my life. So after doing admin stuff for a while, I decided to try something else. And I went to grad school. And I decided, both my parents are teachers, and it just, I guess maybe it was an eventuality that the teaching bug bit me and got interested in teaching English as a second language because I've always been interested in language and communication and other cultures. And I gave me the chance to travel. So, I thought this is great. I can help people, I can travel, I can teach, do what I love. It's gonna be awesome. And the training program really helped me be a more effective communicator because, you're talking about speaking and writing, pronunciation, grammar, all of it, but also the cross-cultural aspects that you need when you're working with people from other places. And so I feel like that was a really invaluable part of my education. And then after my master's degree, I did what most ESL teachers do. I went abroad to get some experience. Does anyone have a guess as to where this picture was taken? It is not Portland, it is somewhere overseas. If anyone has a guess, you can put it in the chat. Taipei, good guess, but no. China, also a good guess, but no. Singapore, nope. Macau, Shell wins. It is Macau. Yes, I spent a year teaching at the University of Macau, and it was awesome. Made a lot of friends. I ate some incredible food. I got to do a lot of sightseeing. It was wonderful. And then I came back to the US because I missed my family. And you saw my LinkedIn post, ha ha ha, good job. I came back and started teaching at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And then later went and spent a couple of semesters teaching at California College of the Arts. And in both spots, I worked with international students who needed some help expressing themselves more effectively in English. So not only teaching those language skills, but also the kinds of tasks that people need to be successful when they're talking about their art and design work. So, critique, presenting, writing about their work, all those kinds of things. And I really loved it. I was really excited because it was like the perfect balance of my, past education experience, combining art and design and language and helping people. I loved it. It was great. However, I could tell after doing that for about 5 years, getting frustrated with the administration, that it was also not going to work long term because, higher education was having a lot of problems. This was even before the pandemic and things are worse now. And so I thought, I've got this opportunity. My husband took a job in another state. I'm like, this is my chance to do my own thing. So I decided to start coaching online and started my own business. So that was back in 2017. And so for the past 7 years, I've been kind of combining all of my past expertise and experience to transform into a communication coach, helping creatives tell their stories more effectively in their speaking and in their writing so they can feel seen and connect with their audience and level up their careers. And in many ways, like I said, it's, combining all those things from the past and giving me new opportunities to teach and help people in a different way. So it's been great. I really feel like it's sort of the ideal combination of all my skills and experience. And, on top of that, I've really tried to build on all of the knowledge that's available. I follow lots of experts on LinkedIn. I've read lots of books about design and communication. And during the pandemic, I took the opportunity to start presenting workshops because there were a lot of folks looking for online events. So I got my first one at the AIGA Portfolio Festival. And I think that was back in 2000. And through that experience, really realized how much demand there is for people who need help with storytelling. And, you know, instead of focusing so much on the international population, I realized, wow, there are a lot of people who want this kind of support. And so I've kind of pivoted my approach a little bit over that time to focus more on the needs of designers, specifically, you know, to advance their careers through, you know, speaking more effectively about their work or building their portfolios, interviewing, all that good stuff. So taking all of that research that I've done and the workshops and the private work I've done with, you know, my coaching business, I've also done some mentoring at ADP List, about, you know, 80 so designers over the past couple of years. And throughout all of that, what I've found is that there are some people making some really amazing work and working really hard, but struggling to express themselves effectively. And I want to help them find their voices so they can share their talents and advance their careers. It's been a really rewarding experience for me because I love helping people discover what makes them unique and find ways to tell their stories more effectively. And I'm hoping we can begin that process with you today. So my main focus in my day-to-day coaching business, as I said, is to help designers improve their storytelling, whether it's in their portfolios, presentations, interviews, meetings, whatever. And typically I do that by helping them discover their unique value and create engaging portfolios so they can talk about their work clearly and confidently in the interview process. And I think this is especially important for women because, as we all know, it's often more challenging to be heard in some spaces, and we're often held to sort of a different communication expectation than men are. And so it can be tricky to come across as confident and effective in that situation. I've found that a lot of people seek me out because they've been told, oh, I really need to include more storytelling when I talk about my work, but I just don't know how to do it. And so that's sort of how the Simple Sauce framework was born. I was trying to find kind of a quick and easy, memorable way to help folks with that process. So I'd like to share with you kind of how I started, the 5 most common problems that I see in people's stories. But first, I'm curious what you think. What, if you had to guess, what would you guess the most common storytelling problems are? You know, we all hear tons of stories every day. We've heard good ones. We've heard bad ones. So I'm sure you have some ideas. Feel free to put them in the chat. And when I talk about storytelling, you know, I'm talking about how you use it as a designer and talk about yourself and your work, not like writing books or, you know, many different types of storytelling, but we've kind of got a narrow view here. Not concise, not coherent, not suited to the audience, rambling, not amusing or entertaining, just being a generalist, lack of suspense. Nice, nice. Lacks connection, lack of clarity. Okay. Yep, those are good. I think those are all very on point. So here's what I have sort of noticed. Too long or overwhelming. That's probably the biggest one, especially when it comes to case studies. That's really true. And sometimes presentations too. People just pack so much stuff into a presentation that you just cannot take it all in, right? And, you know, if you're scrolling through a case study, nobody's going to read a huge page of text. You know, you got to make it scannable. You got to make it chunked. You got to make it easy. Nobody wants to listen to every single detail of your project unless it's something exciting or interesting or relevant. So, and likewise with interviewing, you know, it can be tempting to want to say everything you can possibly say about a topic, but sometimes it's better to just give a shorter answer and then give your audience a cue or a question to be like, you know, do you want me to continue with this? Or, you know, kind of let them guide you as to how much detail to give. You know, I always leave them wanting a little bit more, because you don't want to bore or overwhelm your audience. And although I think it's a great idea to document your process when you're working on your projects so that you have something to reference, that doesn't mean you need to include every single step that you did. And I feel like for a lot of folks, that's kind of how they approach their case studies, and they try to include every single thing sort of unnecessarily. The other problem that I've seen, and some of you mentioned this, is it's not tailored for your audience. So you've probably heard the saying, if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. And that's true here as well. So for example, for me, you know, when I post something to LinkedIn, I'm not trying to appeal to everybody on LinkedIn. Of course, my audience is very specific. I'm looking at designers who want to improve their storytelling. And if those people read my posts, that's what I want. And if nobody else reads them, I don't care. That's fine. I don't need anybody else to read them. I just care about my audience. Too generic or, kind of boring. I think that's a really common problem too. People are trying to appeal to everybody. And so they try to write kind of these vanilla flavored case studies or, talk about themselves in a really general way because you want to appeal to everyone when you're on the job market, right? You want everyone to feel like you've got a chance with them. But in reality, that doesn't really work because you don't stand out. You're not going to find a good match that way. You're just going to seem bland to more people. And that's not really the goal. And I see that a lot, even with just like a simple branding statement. People say something like, oh, well, I want to help users and find effective business solutions. Yeah, but so does everyone. And so if you don't find a unique and specific way to say that, it's not really going to catch anybody's attention. So if the guideline I kind of use is if everybody in your field can say the same thing, it's not really specific enough to be interesting. And so that's something we have to be careful about too. The next thing is making mistakes. So that could be grammar mistakes, style, in terms of writing, presentation, tone, all those things can make your audience sort of question you, because if you're making mistakes in your writing or your speaking, your audience may doubt your other abilities as well. Communication is a big part of design. And so getting very comfortable with telling your story well and building your communication skills is going to help you in the long run. Whether that's, taking the time to proofread or, checking your punctuation and your writing style, choosing a tone that's appropriate. I've found that a lot of people, especially when they're writing their case studies, they're kind of nervous. And so they tend to write in a really formal way and sort of like standoffish. And that's just not what people do anymore. I think, especially since the pandemic, we've kind of seen a transition to being more personal, being more engaged, and a little, more conversational. You can be professional and still be conversational. And I think that is a great way to connect with your audience more effectively. If you're too formal, it just feels awkward. And part of what you're selling when you're, writing your case studies or presenting is your personality, how easy it is to talk to you. The other thing is a lack of confidence. If you don't feel confident about what you're saying about yourself, your audience is going to feel that and they're going to question you as well. So all of those things are, things you want to try to avoid. And then finally, the last problem is it's not really a story, as we defined as definition C, a narrative of interesting, amusing, or biographical incident. I find that a lot of times case studies are just a big list of steps, and it's kind of like reading a report. It's more factual, it's not interesting. And that's just not fun. Or if I look at someone's about page and it's more like a bio. It's just like, here's all the things I've done. But I'm like, okay, but who are you? I don't feel like I'm getting to know the person at all, just with facts. That isn't enough anymore. So you need to find some way to draw your audience in and make them excited and interesting if you want to really connect. All right, so those are what I've noted as sort of the 5 most common problems that I've seen with my clients or, seen people sharing online. So now that we've talked about some of those common problems, I want to connect it back to you for a minute. I want everybody to take a minute and just reflect on a time when you had to present or talk about your work and it didn't go well. We've all been there. Try to remember, if you can, what was it that went wrong? Was it anything on this list? You don't have to share it in the chat. You can just think about it. It's just good to have something specific in mind, kind of to help you kind of apply what we're going to talk about with the framework. So just kind of think about what of these things we were talking about today or that particular incident, what kinds of things do you struggle with and how could you use the framework to help you overcome those the next time you have to give a talk. So as we go through the framework, Just try to think about how you can apply it to your personal situation. All right, so now let's imagine you've got another opportunity to present your work or your career or yourself coming up on the horizon. You're going to want to make this talk as engaging and clear as possible. So here's a framework you can use to make that easier. I'm just going to go through it quickly first, and then we'll go through each point in detail. S is for selective. Be selective about what you include. A is for your audience. Consider your audience and their needs when you're preparing. U, what makes your story unique? That's what makes it interesting. C, show your credibility. There are a lot of ways you can do this. And then E, use some storytelling elements. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a minute. So let's break this down a little bit. Be selective about what you include. So a lot of the folks that I work with try to include their entire design process when they talk about their projects. And I know that that's the advice that's out there. You know, you have to show your process. You have to talk about your design process. Yes, you do. But that doesn't mean you have to include everything. Your audience knows the design process. They don't need you to explain it. They just want to know what's interesting about it. They want to know the nuggets of excitement. You know, what are the highlights? That's all you need. You don't have to go on forever explaining every step of your case study. It's not necessary and it's not effective. So instead, for every story that you create or that you tell, especially a case study, I recommend starting with some kind of a brainstorm. You know, don't start with like, oh, I have all this information I have to include. No, start with a brainstorm first where you try to think about your goal for the talk or the case study and what details you want to include that will help you reach those goals. What information will actually help you reach those goals in your story. Then you can go back and choose from your notes, okay, well, what are the most interesting parts of your journey? And build the story around those highlights with intention. The intention being to tell a good story, not to include every single detail. Because, you know, if people have questions about the details, you can always answer them. You know, ideally, there's a Q&A after your presentation, those questions can be addressed, or they give you an interview after reading your case study because they want to know more. That's great. You don't have to give it all up front. And often people will ask me, well, how long should it be? Like, what's the ideal length? It depends, unfortunately. You know, it varies by the story. You know, which parts do you need to make it interesting? You should include everything you need to make it interesting and nothing else. So make it as long as it needs to be to accomplish your goal, and that's it. Cut all the fluff. And I know, easier said than done, but that's the idea. That's the goal. Oops, not doing my bullet points here. Start with a brainstorm, remember your goals, choose the most interesting parts, build your story with intention, and cut the fluff, as we said. Consider your audience. So the goal obviously is to connect with your audience and get them to engage, whether it's a presentation or a portfolio case study. So you want to think about how you can accomplish that. And one way is to think about who they are specifically. What do you know about your audience? What motivates them? What are their needs? What are they curious about? What problems they have that you might be able to solve? I remember someone in the chat said that trying to guess what kind of questions their audience might have. Take some time to think about it. Take some time to research. Take some time to guess. You probably have some idea. How do you want them to feel during your presentation or when they're looking at your case study? That's part of your goal. Do you want them to feel impressed by what you're saying? Do you want them to feel concerned about a problem you're bringing up? Do you want them to feel excited about something you're proposing? How can you generate that feeling through the story you're telling? And what do they want to know? You know, the better you know your audience, the better you can predict or guess what it is that they're after, what's motivating them to listen or to not listen to you. Try to give them what they want. If you do, they'll be engaged and they'll be a lot more willing to, you know, go along with what you're presenting or pitching or to want to talk to you further. You, what makes your story unique? And this one's a little tricky. It may seem counterintuitive, but the things that make you different are the things that will help you stand out and get noticed. And I think we all know this on a surface level, but I also think a lot of us have some sort of things that we try to downplay or hide about our stories that we don't feel confident about. Almost everybody I work with, sooner or later, something like this comes up where they're like, oh, well, I don't really want to talk about that because I don't want them to know that. I'm trying to like keep that on the down low. Maybe it's because you've just finished school and so you don't have any like real projects, or maybe you're pivoting from another career and so you feel like you're behind the rest of your peers in terms of your experience. Or maybe you have a different language background, or maybe you come from a historically underrepresented group and so you have a different perspective. People feel self-conscious about those things. And so a lot of times they try to kind of hide those things and gloss over and tell this like everything's happy and great kind of story. But hiding those things doesn't work. Instead, I encourage you to present them as assets. Find a way to not just acknowledge those things, but think about how those can show your unique value and actually help make you a better designer, and present them as such, because the way you talk about yourself conveys a lot, about your confidence. And if there are things in your story that you're like, oh, I kind of don't really want anyone to know this, that's going to come through. Whereas if you're like, yeah, this is me and this is what I do and here's how it's going to help you, that confidence is going to show, and that's going to change the way your audience hears your story. So think about ways that you can show your unique value through those differences, your perspective, your skills, your experience, your vision, whatever it may be. And try to let go of whatever anxiety you have about being different and just think of how you can use those differences to make your story better. You can't erase them, you can't change them, but you can use them. And, think about, I feel like some of the most inspirational stories I've heard are ones where someone had something that made them different, that they overcame or that they found out how to use to succeed. And it made them, made them special, made them different, made them have the extra drive it took to be successful. And, all you have to do is watch a Nike commercial and, you can think of some of those yourself, I'm sure. So think of it that way. There are all kinds of people who are overcoming more difficult things than our problems every day and accomplishing great things. C, show your credibility. So of course we all want to seem professional. And, at a very basic level, you want to make sure you don't have a lot of mistakes in your work. So basic proofreading, if that's not your thing, obviously you can get help from a friend or your favorite AI chatbot or a coach or whatever. Just try to use that same eye for detail that you have in your design to your storytelling, whether it's proofreading or checking your punctuation, checking your writing style, all those skills that you have for making sure everything's just perfect, you should apply to your story as well. And like I said before, trying to take a tone, whether it's written or spoken, that is professional but conversational. Don't feel like you have to be super formal. I encourage people to imagine if you were talking to your audience in person, how would you talk to them? If you're like, oh, super formal, then I guess write that way, but probably not. Probably you're going to be a little more conversational and open because you're trying to show that you're easy to talk to, you're easy to communicate with as a person, not just, I'm super formal and this is how I write about myself. So think about that when you're choosing your tone. It's got to be appropriate for your audience. It's got to be a match. And, the tone you use for clients and the way you talk to clients might be different than the way you talk to your boss or a hiring manager. So think about that too. Like really when you're considering your audience, that all matters. Obviously, we all want to be confident in the story that we're telling. So, and a lot of people are like, oh, but I hate listening to myself. I hate watching myself on recordings. I know, but it works. Practicing, getting comfortable with it, getting through the cringy bits until you can just tell your story or at least fake some confidence is an essential part of the process. So, you know, if you can practice with a friend, you can practice with a coach, you can record yourself, whatever you need to do, but get to the point where you can sort of get over those initial anxious feelings that we all have. And then finally, if you're feeling really nervous about presenting, which I know a lot of people do, one thing that I encourage people to do is don't think about yourself. Don't think about your anxious feelings. Think about your audience and their needs. So when you're presenting, you're putting out energy to your audience. And, you know, maybe they're having a terrible day. Maybe they want to be somewhere else. Maybe they're worried about something. Who knows? You know, if your audience isn't responding the way you want, it isn't necessarily your fault. You know, maybe something's going on with them. But what you can do is to try to put out some positivity to them and think about how can I, you know, give the best talk or do the best job or put something good out into the world for my audience, regardless of how they're responding to me. You know, that's something you can control. And, you know, if you're thinking about it that way, it might help you to focus less on your own anxiety or how you might be feeling. So those are all some ways to improve that credibility. And then finally, E, storytelling elements. You know, we all know kind of intuitively some things that make a good story. And if you can grab some of those elements and put them into your presentations or case studies, that'll really help. And it's a little hard because, you know, we get these templates, we get these ways of doing things, you know, whether it's like, oh, well, here, I downloaded this case study template and now I'm just going to fill it out and then I've got a case study. Well, okay, but that doesn't mean it's a good case study. And likewise, we've all sat through probably countless terrible presentations. I know I have terrible presentations. And I don't just mean students, like colleagues too. You're just like, oh, come on. So slow, so long, so pointless. Nobody wants to be in that situation. So don't. I feel like we're exposed to so many bad presentations that somehow you feel like, oh, well, that's how presentations need to be. No, you don't. You don't have to do what everybody else is doing. In fact, I encourage people to think about their own colleagues, like who does this really well? And try to think about how they do it well or what makes it great and emulate that and try to ignore all the people who are wasting your time. Because it tends to sink in and then I'm like, oh, I must do what everyone else does. No, you don't have to. So storytelling elements that you can use. A hook. Everybody needs a hook to draw you in, right? You want to make them care about the outcome. You want to get them interested personally and engaged. Some sort of context. You want to set the scene somehow to help them relate to what's going on, get them invested. It's a great idea throughout your story if you can engage people emotionally and help them to imagine what's going on. So you can do that by using a lot of action verbs because we can easily see them in our mind's eye, and adjectives, words that evoke emotion, getting people invested emotionally in what you're talking about. The hero's journey. Everybody's heard of this, I imagine. You have some central character who starts out with a problem, they have to go through a process to overcome it, and then they have some sort of transformation or achievement at the end. So same thing, when you're telling your project, you know, you don't have to do it in the hero's journey way necessarily, but obviously there should be some kind of problem that you describe and that you overcome and that you talk about how you resolve it. And if you can build it somehow to get your audience to care and be invested in that journey, that's great, you know, even if it's just your weekly meeting. And then your point of view. So you should share your perspective on whatever it is that you're talking about, even if it's a project, because at the end of the day, it's your story. It's still your story, not your project's story. So we want to know about you. Your audience wants to know about your perspective, your problems, your solutions, not just the facts. So those are my storytelling elements. There are more, but these are kind of some major ones that you can use the next time you're writing a story. All right, so that is the whole framework. And before we move on, I have a quick question for you to reflect on. Can any of you think about some of the ways that I applied this framework today while I was telling my story, thinking back to the beginning of our talk. If you can think of any, go ahead and put them in the chat. Yeah, being selective about what I included. The quiz, showing my credibility with my experience. Sharing some unique things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was doing my best to sort of model what I'm preaching here. So just to quickly review, in case it wasn't obvious, I'll just go through that and then we can get to the questions. So yes, I was selective about what I included. I didn't tell you every job I've ever had or every workshop I've ever given in detail. I just picked out a few relevant highlights to kind of show my career journey. I thought about what I needed to tell you to accomplish my goals, which were to connect with you, to share a few experiences that show my credibility and explain how I can help. Then I picked out some details that I thought might help me accomplish those goals and started to put together an outline. Then I considered my audience. Since I'm being hosted by Ladies at UX, SF, and LA, that's about the clearest possible audience name I could think of. So I knew it would be women or non-binary folks who are at some stage of their UX journey. So thank you for making it easy. I also expected that you're probably all interested in improving your storytelling skills. But I did check in at the beginning about those assumptions just to make sure we were all on the same page. So although it might seem obvious, I actually have a pretty specific target audience, women or non-binary UX designers who want to improve their storytelling. And so then I went back to my brainstorm and considered what kinds of questions this specific audience might have for me or about me, and added some of those things to my outline. Next, I thought about, okay, well, what makes me unique? What makes my story unique? How can I stand out from all the other storytelling coaches online? I have an art and design background, and I'm focused on helping designers. I have a lot of communications training. I understand a lot of aspects of the communication challenges designers face and how to improve them. I have a teaching background, so I understand how to break down complex tasks like telling a good story into manageable steps. And I'm a woman, so I understand the challenges that we face in the workplace to have our voices be heard. I went back to my outline again, thought about how I could add some of those points to highlight those parts of my background again to help me connect with my audience. To show my credibility, I added some additional content about my education, my work experience, but I tried to do it in a fun way, not just like, let me recite my resume for you. I chose some examples of other workshops I've given for respected organizations. I mentioned my volunteering. And then after my presentation was complete, I proofread my slides and my handout, and I tried to ensure that the style looked professional. I'm using what I hope is a professional yet conversational tone, because I think that's what's appropriate for a workshop like this. And I also practiced my talk when it was finished so I could speak confidently about my work. And then to try to make it more engaging, I added in some storytelling elements. I added in the little quiz to get you involved in the chat. I tried to set the scene by telling you what I think makes a good story, my definition C. I tried to use a lot of adjectives and action verbs to evoke emotion. I talked about my dream job and what makes it rewarding. I shared a little bit of my hero's journey, my career pivots, not always having my career go the way I wanted, but eventually finding, kind of a job that I really love. And I talked about my point of view, my experience as a woman, a teacher, a creative, all that good stuff. So that is how I applied this framework. And I hope it's getting you kind of interested and thinking about the ways that you could use the secret sauce in your next talk or case study to help improve your storytelling and kind of build up your confidence to make it a more enjoyable process instead of like a thing that you have to dread. But of course, this is just a quick overview. There's only so much we can pack into an hour. So for anybody that would like to go deeper, I have a special offer for Ladies at UX. I am launching a new package in the coming weeks. I'm still updating my website. I just finished this page this week, so you are the first to see it. Sneak peek. But I wanted to make sure that I was ready for your first big event of the year. So essentially, it's a 3-month coaching journey to help you transform your portfolio. So working together, we'll look at your goals, the needs of your audience, try to figure out together what your unique value is, and find some ways to showcase your creativity and your skills so that you have everything you need to create a clear, engaging story in your case studies. As I promised, I've got a special 25% discount for anyone who's watching through Ladies Through UX or Ladies at UX. I've got some spots opening up for April, and I'd love to continue this conversation with anyone that's interested. So I've got a link I'll share with you in the chat, but this is also going to be on the handout that I'll share if you want to look at it later. And of course, if you have any questions or want to chat with me about this program, you're free to message me, email, LinkedIn, or you can book a discovery call, free 30-minute chat. We can talk about it, see if it's right for you. So before we get to the Q&A, I promised you some things. Let me put the handout into the chat here. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully that sends. Can you see it? Cool. So there's that. It's got all the main points from today as well as my special offer link. They mentioned my lovely co-host mentioned the survey. It's a combined survey. There's some questions for them about this event and about your organization, how they can better serve you. I also have some questions. I like to get feedback on my talks. So it's kind of a joint survey that they're going to be sending out to you via email, I believe. And as a little extra incentive to get you to fill it out, I'm going to do a giveaway. So one of the things that I provide to my clients who are looking for portfolio help is a feedback video. So basically, I will record myself walking through every page of your portfolio and giving some perspective, some initial comments and suggestions about how you could add more storytelling and how you can improve the experience for your audience. Usually about a 5 to 10 minute video. And that's something I typically only offer to my coaching clients, but I'm going to choose one person who completes the survey to receive this giveaway. So I guess I'll give you a week. Seems doable, I think. So by next Saturday, I'll take a look at the list and choose one person to receive that bonus. So a little extra incentive to fill out the survey. And there, it's in the chat for you. All right. Thank you so much. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, in the Q&A or the chat. You can also email me. You can send me a DM on LinkedIn. You can check out my website. I'd love to chat with you.
Thanks so much, Jess. This has been so enjoyable and so insightful, and it's been incredible. And yes, as we all here can see, that you are quite the storyteller. So it's been really nice to learn from a storyteller about storytelling. So thank you. I do want to encourage the questions we have. We already have a Q&A kind of set up, and then we also have some questions. I know Ashley has some questions, and then we'll do some more questions we can catch from all of you guys. Ashley, if you want to ask yours, I do know yours is in the chat. I can read it too as well. You can just turn off your mic and join in. Otherwise, I can read it for you about the what is example for the audience. So if you want me to read it, or you could just turn off your mic, and then we'll do a quick closing afterwards after the questions. So thank you so much, you guys.
Also, anybody who wants to ask a question personally, just raise your hand, and then we can probably unmute you as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we can read it also. You're more than welcome. We can just play that.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you guys want to do.
Well, I see that there's one in the Q&A. Should I just start with that?
Yes,
Sure, we
perfect.
could start with that one. Mhm.
Okay, Heidi would like to know, when applying for an interaction design role, should I still focus on storytelling rather than showing the interactions that I came up with that help solve the user problems? Well, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. I think showing those interactions and telling a story about how you solve the user's problems is your story. I think you can create a story around that. You know, think about, okay, so you're applying for a role, so you know who your audience is. It's going to be your hiring manager, probably, or creative director, whoever it is. Think about what they want to know about you. What do they want to know about these problems that you solved and how you're helping the users? And think about everything that you accomplished while you were working on that project and start to grab story tidbits, kind of, you know, story moments. What were some challenges you overcame? What did you accomplish? What did you feel? You know, the sort of test I often give people is, you know, if you were telling a friend or a colleague about this project, you wouldn't list every step in some sort of a boring way. You'd be like, oh, I'm working on this cool project, and like, here's what's interesting about it, or oh, I'm really stuck. This is like a problem I'm having. You know, you'd grab those juicy tidbits. And you want to do the same thing in this situation. You want to give the highlights and the challenges and show what you've accomplished, both as a through the project for the users, but also as a person. How did you grow and what did you learn through the experience? Like, that's the story that's going to interest your audience. Hopefully that answers your question, but if not, feel free to add on.
Thank you. That's so helpful. Thank you so much, Jess. And I know Ashley has a question. Her question is, what is an example of how you might support your audience? And how would that look like in an interview situation?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, in an interview, it's tough because we feel a lot of the times, I think a lot of us feel very nervous. You know, I get nervous for interviews too, because you feel like they have all the power. You know, you're there to impress them and please them and say what they want. But that's not true. It's a two-way street. It goes both directions. And they're looking for something too. You know, they need someone to solve a problem for them. And so if you can go in and you can show that, like, hey, I'm that person. I'm friendly, I'm positive, I've got this great experience I'm going to tell you about. Here's how I can solve your problem. That you're making their day, because they don't want to interview 200 people to find a solution. They want to get someone in there fast. And so if you're the right person and you're a good match and you present yourself well and you seem friendly and easy to talk to, it's going to make their day, because they don't have to worry about trying to find somebody else or being like, oh, well, I guess this person's okay, but I don't really, you know anything about them. This is sort of a very general description of, you know, their experience. I can't really tell what they're like. You know, make it easy for them, and think about projecting yourself in the most positive way you can, like I said earlier, because you don't know what their day is. You don't know what they're coming to the interview with. You know, I think it's very easy to think, like, if your audience isn't responding well, that you're doing something wrong, but that may not be the case at all. You know, they might have something else on their mind. Your boss might be after them. Who knows? So just try to make it as an enjoyable experience as you can. You know, think about them like your users. Try to create a great experience for your interviewers. That's how you can support them, and that's going to make you look good.
Thanks so much for that. That's really useful advice. Wow. We also have another question from Viviana. What's the recommended amount of detail to show in my case studies when I'm presenting? I have a question. I have the same question.
Well, like I said, unfortunately, there's no like clear guideline about that really. It's just kind of, you know, as much as you need to accomplish your goal. So, you know, there again, you kind of have to think about when you're presenting for an interview. You know, usually you're on a tight deadline, you know, or even like on a weekly meeting. You know, people try to crunch in as much as they can. And that doesn't always create the best experience for your audience. So you want to be really selective. Think about, okay, what are the most interesting things about this project? What can I say that's going to really show them my skills and my unique value and how I problem solve and how I overcame challenges to accomplish my goals, to help the user or to help the business or whatever it was. and just grab those story tidbits, create kind of a highlight reel, and you kind of want to pique their interest too, because ideally, you talk about something and then it's their turn. And if they are like, oh, well, that's interesting, tell me more about that, they can ask for more, but they can't ask for less, really. So I would say start with the stuff that you think is the real gold, the best stuff, and then let it kind of evolve as a conversation. You don't necessarily feel like you have to give them everything up front. So you kind of have to read the room a little bit. You kind of have to think about, okay, well, how much time do I have for this interview? I can't spend 5 minutes on one project, probably, but you can maybe give them 4 or 5 good tidbits that then they can build off of and ask more questions.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, there's another question from Jonah Lee. What storytelling strategies are best for a non-creative audience? Most hiring people are not creative, so I'm not sure how to make a great case study portfolio for them. Great question.
Well, I think the needs of the audience are still really important, even if they're not creative. So like, I don't know if you're talking about, I guess depending on who is doing the hiring, if you're talking about recruiters maybe, or even if you're talking about clients, when you're presenting to clients, they don't understand design probably. You have to really break it down and keep it simple and explain to them like why something is good. You can't just say like, oh, well, I created this and it looks great, so you should go with this. You have to give some rationale and explain how you came to that conclusion, or explain why you're making the choices you did. Those are the parts that make it interesting and are compelling. And I would say the same thing, for a hiring situation. They want to know how you make decisions, how you deal with pressure, how you solve problems. So those whys and hows in your story are the parts that are really the most important, because, facts are just facts. Everybody kind of knows what goes into the design process, but why did you choose to do this instead of this? And how did you come up with that solution? Those are the parts that are interesting, I think, whether you're a creative or not. Those show your skills and your capability and your people skills, often if you're working with a team. So a lot of opportunities to show your unique value and how you can provide that value to help solve their problem, no matter who your audience is.
Thanks so much. Does anyone else have any other questions, as far as if you want to make sure that we capture all of your questions? If you guys want to raise your hand, you can take off your mic.
I think we may have gotten to everyone's, but please chime in the chat if you'd like your...
Yeah, please. We don't want to miss anyone's, for sure.
Great questions, by the way. You guys are smiling.
I know.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
And if people have questions that they don't necessarily want to share publicly, you're always welcome to share them with me privately too. That's fine.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone. This has been so wonderful, Jess, having you here. As we wrap up, I just want to say a huge thank you to our audience, our participants that showed up and interacted and engaged, and all of you guys that were here listening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this amazing workshop. It was so interactive and engaging as well. Please don't forget to connect with Jess and look out for our post-event survey. It's a combo one from her and from us, and we would love it. It won't be too long. And let's keep the conversations going with ladies at UX SF, LA, Jess. Let's continue to inspire each other. Happy Saturday, everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. It means so much. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and we appreciate Girl Power.
Yes,
thank you so much for everybody who joined in, and thank you so much to Jess. And yeah, make sure to fill out the survey and get that giveaway and work on that portfolio.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jess, for coming.
Right,
Thanks so much, you guys. Thanks, everyone.